Assalamualaikum. Today we'll be starting with squint, strabismus, deviation of the eyes. Squint थोड़ा सा मुश्किल टॉपिक है because there's a lot of theory and concept. अगर आपको वो समझ आ जाता है तो it will be a lot easier for you to understand why we do the things we do in management, in workup and in treatment. तो उसको समझने के लिए ज़रूरी है कि वो दो वीडियोस शेयर की थी मैंने, एक हर्शबर्ग टेस्ट की थी और एक कवर एंड कवर की. आपको उनका कॉन्सेप्ट होना चाहिए कि उनमें क्या हो रहा है और क्यों हो रहा है. ठीक है, दैट इज इम्पोर्टेंट एंड दोज टेस्ट्स आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. एमसीक्यूज में तो आ जाते हैं, करवा भी लेते हैं परफॉर्म आपसे वॉट टेस्ट में या वाइवा में कभी कभी. So beginning with squint, the first thing we have to know is what is squint. Okay, there's a definition of squint. So there's a definition of squint, and if we know that definition, it becomes a lot easier for us to classify it and further talk about it. So the first thing is, what is the definition of squint? And does anyone know what squint is?
जब बाइनोकुलर सिंगल विजन नहीं होती, दोनों आइज की मूवमेंट कोऑर्डिनेटेड.
Okay, so you're saying कि squint में दोनों आइज की मूवमेंट कोऑर्डिनेटेड नहीं होती. What if I say कि squint में दोनों आइज की मूवमेंट कोऑर्डिनेटेड होती है? It depends upon the type of squint. तो एक squint में होती है, एक में नहीं होती. तो वो भी हम डिस्कस कर लेते हैं किस में होती है, किस में नहीं होती. But the definition must include every subtype, right? So if we take this as a definition, it only explains one subtype of squint. It does not account for the other type. So we have to come up with a definition which helps us actually describe what is happening, and it's an inclusive definition. Okay? So किसी को पता है? Does anyone know, or should I write it down? I think I'll write it down. So squint, basically, squint is inability of the eyes to inabilities of the visual axis, but inability of the visual axis. It's not visual acuity, it's visual axis of the eyes to meet at the point of regard. What does this mean? When we're saying that the visual axis of the eyes, they are unable to meet at the point of regard. Okay. So this basically means that when we have eyes and they're looking at an object, as you're looking at your phone screen or a laptop screen, both of your eyes, they are looking at the same point. If you're reading this line, both of your eyes are looking at this line. Okay, the letter you're reading. If you're reading this line, then your eyes are looking at this point. So this is the point of regard at which your eyes are looking at. Okay, and since you can perceive this thing, perceive these lines, perceive these words with both your eyes, your visual axes are meeting at the point of regard. Yes, okay. It's in other words, one eye is fixating at the point of regard, which is also called, you can also call it the fixation point. One eye is fixing at it, but the other eye is not fixing at that point. It's looking at the visual axis, it's looking somewhere else. The fixation points of both the eyes are not at the same location. Okay. For example, if your right eye is looking at this line, but your left eye cannot exactly look at that point, or cannot exactly look at this cursor or this marker, then it means that you have a squint. Okay. So when one eye deviates from the fixation point, in other words, it is the inability of the visual axes of both the eyes to meet at a point of regard. I hope I don't have to doodle this and draw it. I guess समझ आ गई आप सबको, तो it's all right. Again, if you think कि नहीं समझ आई, तो I'll draw a short sketch and let you know what I mean by that. तो this is a general definition of squint, and this is an important definition. आपकी books में जो भी definition which are book you're using, make sure to keep the definition in mind. Definition आपको याद होनी चाहिए, ठीक है? Now, depending upon the different types, we say that there's an inability of the visual axis. And that's what. So there's an inability of the visual axis. Sometimes when we have when both our eyes are open, the visual axis they can meet at a point. ठीक है, ये दोनों आंखों से देख रहे हैं तो एक तरफ आप एक पॉइंट पे देख सकते हैं, लेकिन कभी कभी ऐसे होता है कि कोई आपकी पेरिफेरल विजन में कोई चीज ऐसी होगी या आपकी विजन में कोई चीज ऐसी होगी जिसे आप सिर्फ एक आंख से देख रहे हैं. तो I'll further get on this topic. इसको चलो एक बार मैं explain करता हूँ. So basically, squint is an inability of the visual axis to meet at the point of regard, meaning that both the visual axes they are unable to meet at the point of regard. Now, squint has two types. It can either be committant or it can either be incomitant. What do we mean by committancy? What do we mean when we say that the squint is committant or non-committant? Does anyone know? क्या मतलब है इसका? इसको concomitant भी कह देते हैं, committant भी कहते हैं. So that is another question. Now, when we said that inability of the visual axis to meet at the point of regard, उसका मतलब है कि both the eyes they are not fixating at the same point. If this abnormal relationship between the eyes, if this abnormal relationship between the visual axes is maintained in all directions of gaze, it means that the squint is committant. If this abnormal relationship is not maintained in all directions of gaze and it is only found in some directions of gaze, then our squint is non-committant. ठीक है, तो हमें ये समझ आ गई. Then the next big question is, what do we mean when we say squint is manifest or it's latent? Does anyone know what this means?
लेटेंट में टेंडेंसी होती है लेकिन मैनिफेस्ट में वो शो कर रहा होता है.
शो कर रहा होता है, बिल्कुल राइट. सो इट डिपेंड्स के जो इनएबिलिटी है of the visual axis to meet at one point, is it corrected by fusional capacity or not? अब आप पूछेंगे कि fusional capacity क्या होती है and how it is corrected. Basically, fusion का मतलब ये है कि both the eyes they are able to focus on one point of regard or they are able to fixate at one point. तो जब वो एक पॉइंट पर फिक्सेट कर जाती हैं तो इट मीन्स दैट द आईज कैन फ्यूज. अगर फिक्सेशन की वजह से विजुअल एक्सिस की जो अगर एक दूसरे से मीट कर जाते हैं, कोरिस्पॉन्ड कर जाते हैं, तो देन इट मीन्स दैट द स्क्विंट इज लेटेंट. लेकिन अगर फ्यूजनल कैपेसिटी भी करेक्ट नहीं कर पाती तो इट मीन्स दैट द स्क्विंट इज मैनिफेस्ट. तो दो थोड़े से अजीब से कॉन्सेप्ट्स अभी हमने डिस्कस किए कि चलो इनएबिलिटी ऑफ द विजुअल एक्सिस टू मीट एट द पॉइंट ऑफ रिगार्ड तो हमें समझ आ जाता है, बट कॉमिटेंसी और मैनिफेस्ट स्क्विंट को हम थोड़ा सा और देख लेते हैं. So these are some poorly drawn eyes. This is the right eye, this is the left eye, right? So you must have read extraocular muscles and their functions. This is the primary position of gaze. And both the eyes, they are looking forward. If you're looking and staring into these eyes, then this will your right eye is looking at this eye, and your left eye is looking at this eye, right? So the first thing, squint means that there is inability of inability of the visual axis to converge. So one eye must be somewhat deviated. कहीं भी deviate हो सकती है. So you can see that if one eye is deviated, then the visual axis they do not meet. That is the first thing. What is the concept of commitmency? उसको हम अभी देख लेते हैं. Normally when we are looking at मतलब जब भी हम किसी ऑब्जेक्ट को देख रहे होते हैं, whenever we are looking at anything, both our eyes they function simultaneously और एक साथ काम करती हैं. आप बेशक अपनी एक आंख बंद कर लें और अपनी आप सिर्फ दाईं या बाईं आंख से भी देखें. अगर आप दाईं आंख को एक तरफ हिलाते हैं, if you move your right eye to the left side, then even if your left eye is closed, your left eye will also move. The same is the case with the right side. So, meaning that whenever we move one eye, if we want to look at one side, we both of our eyes move and they move in the same direction or in the same degrees. एक ही जैसा motion होता है उनका. So, but what happens if, let's say, in the normal position of gaze, both eyes looking straight forward. However, when I ask the person to look towards his right side, his right eye looks towards the right side, it moves, but his left eye still looks forward. What is happening in this case? The abnormal relationship between both the eyes is only present when the person is told to look towards his right. But when I tell the person again to look straight forward, that abnormal relationship disappears. The eyes, they maintain a normal relationship. This means that the squint is non-committent or incommittent, meaning that the abnormal relationship or the inability of the visual axis to meet is only present in some directions of gaze. ये बात आपको समझ आ गई है? अगर नहीं आए तो चैट में बता दें, वैसे बता दें. I'll repeat this. This is a repeat किया देता हूँ. अच्छा, तो थोड़ा सा स्टार्ट से कहते हैं. What are the positions of gaze? आपको positions of gaze सारों को पता है? What is this? This is the central position of gaze. ठीक है? This is the central position. If I tell the person to look upwards, then what is this motion called?
Elevation.
It's elevation. ठीक है? Similarly, if I tell him to look downwards, then what is this called?
Depression.
It's depression. It's very simple, right? And if movement towards the side, this is levoversion. Okay, this is levo elevation. This is levo depression. This is dextroversion. This is dextro elevation. This is dextro depression. ठीक है? And these are this is the central gaze. तो जो मैंने कुछ 6 positions बताई हैं: levo version, levo elevation, levo depression, dextroversion, dextro elevation, dextro depression. These are called the cardinal positions of gaze. क्योंकि हम ये चेक करते हैं वैसे भी, और इनको 6 cardinal positions कहते हैं. So in the normal eyes, in your eyes and in my eyes, what happens is that both the eyes, they move in the same. When the person is told to look at some place, they move somewhere. They move in the same capacity. They move in the same degrees. मतलब उनकी movement एक जैसी होती है. For example, if I'm telling a person to look upwards, he will look upwards. This is a normal reaction. Downwards, normal. If I tell him to look towards the right, this is normal. If I tell him to look towards the left, this is normal. However, if I tell this person who has, if I tell him to look upwards, he looks upwards. All right, this is normal. If I tell him to look downwards, he looks downwards. This is normal. However, if I tell him to look towards the left only, right, this eye does not move and this eye moves. So in which direction, in which cardinal position of gaze does he have a squint now?
Levoversion.
Okay, so in levoversion, the visual axis of his eyes are not meeting at the point of regard. They are not fixating on the object. लेकिन ये abnormal relationship जो eyes का है दूसरों के साथ, ये सिर्फ एक position of gaze में ऐसे ही है. ये हर position of gaze में तो नहीं है ना. जब मैं से कहता हूँ कि center देखिए, center में देख लेता है. अब यहाँ पे abnormal relation गायब हो गया. I tell him to look upwards and he look upwards. The relationship is normal. So the abnormal relationship between the eyes, when it is only present in 1 or 2 directions or in some directions of gaze, then that abnormal relationship is called a non commitment squint. I hope you've understood this. Okay. But let's say that there's an abnormal relationship which is maintained in all directions of gaze. So if I'm asking the person to look straight ahead, and this is their eyes. So the right eye is looking straight ahead, but the left eye, it's deviated inwards. So if I tell him to look upwards, he will look upwards, but you can see that that abnormal relationship is maintained in this direction of gaze. Similarly, if I tell him to look downwards, the abnormal relationship is still maintained in this direction of gaze. If I tell him to look towards the right, so this abnormal relationship is still maintained in this gaze. मतलब इस तरह तो नहीं होगा कि इसका कौनी आंख से बाहर निकल जाएगा, but it will be more deviated. Similarly, if I tell the person to look towards his left, that abnormal relationship will still be maintained. So when the abnormal relationship is maintained in all directions of gaze, the squint is called a commitment squint. Okay, I hope you've understood this now. ताकि हम आगे चलें, so that we can move forward. Okay, so this was an important concept of committancy. What do we mean by commitment squint and what do we mean by non-committant squint? Okay. Non-committant, incommittant, committant for concomitant भी कहीं जाके लिखा होगा. So this was the first concept which we discussed. Okay, what do we mean by committant and non-committant? And what do we mean when squint is manifest or latent? That is the next concept. So let's just say that this is the primary position of gaze. Okay. This person has no squint apparently. हम इसको भी check करेंगे हम कैसे करते हैं. However, let's say that if I introduced a blank screen or a semi-transparent screen of some sorts in front of this eye. Now I've inserted a sort of a blank or a semi-transparent screen in front of this eye. Normally, both the eyes, they had a good relationship with each other. It's normal. There's nothing wrong with it. However, as soon as I inserted a somewhat transparent screen in front of this eye, it deviated. Normally, ऐसा होता है, ऐसा नहीं होता. Whenever we close one of our eyes and the other eye is still open, normally this doesn't happen. Both the eyes, they still maintain their normal relationship. Normally relationship maintain रहता है. बेशक आप एक आंख बंद कर लें अपनी या दूसरी आंख बंद कर लें, बेशक एक आंख से देखें. So when I introduced a cover in front of this eye and it deviated, and when I removed this cover, this eye, it again maintained its again came back to its normal relationship. So the question is, what is happening and why is it happening? So we know what's happening. The eye is deviating. The question is, why is it happening? Well, does anyone know why this is happening? Okay, if I introduce a cover in front of the eye, a semi-transparent cover of sorts, the eye, it deviates. Why is this happening?
maybe ये tendency accommodation की वजह से ये वो eyes fuse और जो ही हमने एक को cover कर दिया वो इस तरह से.
ठीक है, तो you're somewhat right. Accommodation का जो concept हम थोड़ा सा आगे जाके discuss करते हैं. So what is happening is when both the eyes, they're uncovered, there is binocular vision. And this person has learned to see binocularly. उसकी दोनों आंखें काम कर रही हैं, आपकी तरह वो दोनों आंखों से देख सकता है. And he has good occipital cortex development. So his visual axes are maintained by fusion or the capacity of fusion. However, when we insert a cover in front of one of the eyes, what are we doing? We are inhibiting the fusional capacity because he is able to see the target or the point of regard and fixate on it using his right eye, but using his left eye, he is unable to fixate on that point of regard. So the first thing is that we have broken the fusion, and the second is this eye must have a tendency. It must have a tendency to do something because it's deviating, right? So if the deviation is only present when fusional capacity is broken, or fusion is broken, or fusion is not possible, then such a squint we term as aphoria, or we term it as a latent squint. See here, how can it hamper the vision of that side? It's not a transparent. ठीक है, reason I've integrate that it's semi-transparent or translucent. मतलब आप एक आंख के सामने अगर कोई प्लास्टिक शीट रख लें and it's not a good plastic sheet, आपको जनरली तो नजर आ जाएगा कि पहली तरफ क्या पड़ा है, लेकिन आपसे मैं कहूँ कि एक आंख के सामने एक जो किताबों के ऊपर प्लास्टिक लगा के रखते हैं, आप एक आंख के सामने वो रखें और आप उस दोनों आंखें खोल के सामने एक ऑब्जेक्ट पढ़ें, तो आप उस आंख के सामने जिसके सामने प्लास्टिक शीट होगी, यू आर अनएबल टू अप्रिशिएट द फाइनल डिटेल्स. तो आप एक पॉइंट पे फिक्स नहीं कर सकेंगे. दैट इज व्हाट वी आर ट्राइंग टू डू. तो ट्रांसपेरेंट रखने का ही मकसद होता है कि जो एग्जामिनर है, इन आवर केस हम वो देख सकें कि आंख कहाँ जा रही है. अगर मैं इसको बिल्कुल ही ब्लैक कर दूं, and if I take a cover which is completely opaque, then I will not be able to see how the eye is reacting. So this translucent cover, okay, this translucent cover, what it does that it hampers binocular vision, and it also allows us to generally see where the eyes are deviating. So whenever the fusional capacity is broken, and only then the eye it deviates. And when fusional capacity is possible in the eyes, they maintain their normal relationship. Then such a deviation of the eyes, such a squint is called a latent squint or a phoria. ठीक है? तो थोड़ा सा let's say मैं आपसे दोबारा पूछता हूँ. I introduce a cover. There's a normal relationship in all directions of the eye. ठीक है? ऊपर नीचे दाएं बाएं सारा एक साथ अच्छा relationship चल रहा है आंखों का. So I introduce a cover in front of the left eye. His left eye is not deviating now. So I say, चलो मैं right आंख पे cover introduce करता हूँ. So I introduce a cover into his right eye, and his right eye, we can see behind the cover that as soon as we introduce the cover, right eye it deviates upwards. So latent squint is present in which eye in this case?
Right exophoria.
Right.
ठीक है, it's a right-sided squint, and because his eye is deviating towards the right, it's called an exophoria. अच्छा, तो कभी-कभी ये होता है कि you right translucent की बजाय बिल्कुल opaque material use कर देते हैं, ठीक है? Sometimes in tests or in labs, or when we don't have a translucent material, it's not provided in some places. They usually use an opaque material. So how will we know behind an opaque material okay, the eye is deviated? How can we tell?
हम उसे कवर करने के बाद अनकवर करेंगे.
अनकवर करेंगे, राइट? तो हमेशा आउटवर्ड नहीं होती, कहीं भी हो सकती है. दिस वाज एन एग्जांपल. इसमें मैंने आउटवर्ड डिविएट की थी, इट कैन आल्सो डिविएट इनवर्ड्स. तो हम इसे अनकवर करने के बाद हमने कवर किया, तो हम उसे अनकवर भी करेंगे. तो व्हेन वी अनकवर, binocular vision and fusion are now possible. His eye makes a recovery movement towards the left or towards inwards. So based on the recovery movement, as the recovery movement is inward, क्योंकि recover करने के लिए आंख अंदर मूव कर रही है ना, तो we say कि अच्छा अंदर की तरफ मूव कर रही है binocular fusion की, तो इसका मतलब है कि जब ये कवर था तो आंख बाहर की तरफ मूव हुई थी. तो बाहर की तरफ है तो it's an exo, and since it has a recovery motion, so it's a phoria, it's a latent squint. So this is a right exophoria. Okay, I hope this is clear to all of you. Okay, how do we label different squints? What is an exophoria? So exophoria हम बाद में करेंगे, but simple terms. What are phorias? What are tropias? Phorias latent होते हैं, tropias manifest होते हैं. And the second thing, what is commitment squint and what is non-commitment squint? I hope this is clear to you all. If this is clear to you, then we can move forward.
भाई मैनिफेस्ट वाली बात बता दें।
मैनिफेस्ट का चलो अच्छा in this case these are normal eyes. You shine a bright torch in both the eyes. This is the pupillary reflex which you are seeing. आप जब आंखों में किसी के टॉर्च डालते हैं, लाइट शाइन करते हैं, तो पिपल के बिल्कुल सेंटर पे एक वाइट स्पॉट आ जाता है ड्यू टू लाइट. ऐसे ही है ना? हाँ, डाइवर्जेंस सिर्फ एक आई में ही होगी. एक्सोफोरिया में, इजोफोरिया में, दो में भी हो सकती है. ठीक है, दोनों आंखों में भी डाइवर्जेंस हो सकती है. इट्स कॉल्ड एन ऑल्टरनेटिंग स्क्विंट. और ये कॉन्सेप्ट हम थोड़ा आगे जाके करेंगे इस पर डिस्कशन, कि अभी थोड़ा सा मुश्किल हो जाएगा इसको समझना. तो यस, दोनों में भी हो सकती है, एक में भी हो सकती है. तो मैनिफेस्ट की बात हम कहते थे, राइट? सो इन दीज आइज, बिकॉज दिस इज द नॉर्मल पिपलरी रिफ्लेक्स, तो you're telling the person he has to look at the light source or the torch. He's looking at the torch and the light source in this picture. Okay? And there's nothing unusual about it. If this relationship is maintained, commitment का मतलब ये है कि that abnormal relationship is maintained in all directions. This is a normal relationship, right? ये दोनों आंखों में light reflexes are centered. However, if I say that the light reflex is not centered in this eye, it's somewhat deviated. Light को आप आंख में सेंटर पे ही मार रहे हैं, but his eye is deviated inwards. So, is this a squint now? आपको लग रहा है कि squint है? This is a squint.
Yes.
ठीक है, this is a squint because the Hirschberg's test, the pupillary light reflex, if you've seen that video which I sent, it tells us that a Hirschberg's test, there's a deviation in the right eye, and because the light reflex is towards the right side of the pupil, so the eye is deviated inwards. Now, if this abnormal relationship is maintained throughout, if this abnormal relationship is maintained throughout, when I tell him to look upwards, he looks upwards. When I tell him to look downwards, this is what happens. If I tell him to look left, this. Tell him to look right, this. Tell him to look upwards and outwards, rightwards. Okay. So you can see that the abnormal relationship between both the eyes, it is present at rest, and it is maintained in all directions of gaze. And this abnormal relationship is a commitment squint, because it is present in all directions of gaze. That is the important concept of committancy. So if it were not present in all directions of gaze, meaning that if you tell the person to look straight ahead, and he's looking straight ahead, he's looking fine. There's nothing wrong with him. But if you tell him to look towards the left, and when he looks towards the left, his right eye moves, but his left eye does not move in this direction. So the abnormal relationship, it's only present in one direction of gaze. बाकी सब जगह पे normal है, बाकी हर जगह normal है. ऊपर देखता हूँ तो दोनों आंखें, कहता हूँ ऊपर देखो तो दोनों आंखें ऊपर देखती हैं, सही. राइट में भी कोई मसला नहीं है, नीचे देखना कोई मसला नहीं है. But when I tell him to look towards the left, he is not able to move, look towards the left with his left eye. The abnormal relationship is only present in one direction of gaze. In such cases, the squint is said to be non-committant.
ये light reflex पे से पाएगा manifest वाला.
हाँ, light reflex आएगा. Light reflex is very important in deciding when whether a squint is manifest or not. It tells us a lot of things. So the question now arises: what, where can be the lesion in a committant squint, and where can be the lesion in a non-committant squint? तो थोड़ा सा concept इसमें आ जाता है कि जब हम committant squint की बात कर रहे थे, we were saying कि the eyes, they move equally in all directions of gaze. There isn't any problem. Okay? When I told the person to look upwards, he was looking upwards with both eyes, right? Both eyes, left both eyes. तो जो abnormal relationship था, वो हर direction में मौजूद था. If this is the abnormal relationship, it's present in every direction. But in non-committant squint, the abnormal relationship, it's present only in one direction of gaze. So what do you think can be the cause of such of the lesion if the squint is non-committant?
Cranial, third force is cranial nerves.
Bilkul. So let's just say that if I tell the person to look towards his left, and this is his response. This is a non-committant squint. So if this is the concept, then where can be the lesion be in non-committant squint?
Paralysis of left lateral rectus, sixth nerve.
Sixth nerve. So you're saying that the lesion can be the left lateral rectus muscle is affected, right? You're right. That is correct. अच्छा म्यूट करूँगा काफी शोर आ रहे हैं किसी के माइक में तो only speak for a moment, only unmute for a moment. कानों को सुनाई दे. Thank you. So the lesion can be in the lateral rectus muscle. You're right. The lesion can be in the sixth nerve. कैसे लिखते थे? CN6. cranial nerve 6 से मसला हो सकता है. और कहाँ मसला हो सकता है?
Localized disease भी हो सकती है जैसे orbital cellulitis वगैरह जो लिमिट कर रही हो आई की मूवमेंट को.
बिल्कुल. There can be a localized disease which is preventing a person's left eye to from looking towards the left. So there can be a localized restriction. Okay? Or if I say there's a hindrance to the lateral rectus, basically मकसद तो ये हम कह रहे हैं ना, there's a hindrance. That hindrance can be a localized restriction. It can be an orbital cellulitis. It can be a mass. Basically, it's anything which is hindering the muscle, which acts on the left eye. In this case, it is the lateral rectus. So that muscle is being hindered. तो जब हम थोड़ा सा आपको गौर करें कि we've discussed two reasons now. Okay, one can be a hindrance in the muscle. The second can be कि muscle को nerve supply नहीं मिल रही. ठीक है. Third क्या हो सकती है? Neural pathway के बारे में थोड़ा सोचें. Muscle से brain तक कुछ सोचें. न्यूक्लियस तो CN6 peripheral nerve भी हो सकती है. CN6 का न्यूक्लियस भी अफेक्ट हो सकता है. For example, if the person has a stroke, CN6 का न्यूक्लियस अफेक्ट हो जाए तब भी वो उस तरफ नहीं देख सकता. और कहाँ मसला हो सकता है? Cranial nerve 6 अपर मोटर न्यूरॉन है, लोअर मोटर न्यूरॉन है.
लोअर मोटर.
तो इसके अपर मोटर न्यूरॉन में मसला हो सकता है. So there can be an upper motor neuron lesion. So basically what we're saying or what we've seen is that whenever there is a non-committant squint, the lesion will be in the output pathway, in the motor system, in the motor response system. कि हमने देखा है कि एक नॉर्मल रिलेशनशिप अगर एक पोजीशन में है या चंद पोजीशंस में है, सारी पोजीशंस में नहीं है, तो it means that in that position there is either a hindrance or either the muscles which are supplying, they are destroyed, they are atrophied, उनमें कोई मसला है. Either the nerves supplying those muscles, they are abnormal, or the system or the neural network, the circuitry which is supplying those muscles, something is wrong with them. So
मायोपैथी और डिस्ट्रोफिस वगैरह तो
बिल्कुल हो सकता है. मायोसीनिया ग्रेविस में भी हो सकता है. ठीक है. मायोसीनिया ग्रेविस जिस तरह है, myopathies, dystrophies, anything of the sort, if it's localized और आपको एक तरह आप localize कर रहे हैं and it's a non-committant squint, yes, that can be a reason. That is also a hindrance to the function of the lateral rectus muscle. So in essence, what we are saying is that whenever there's a non-committant squint, there must be a lesion, a disorder, a dysfunction of the output pathway of the brain. Okay, I hope this is clear to you. This is a very helpful concept. It helps you a lot. So if the output pathway is involved in the non-committant squint in ways in which there's an abnormal relationship in only one direction. But if that abnormal relationship is maintained in all directions of these, then the squint is a committant squint. So where do you think the lesion will be in a committant squint? That is the big question. जब हम नॉर्मल एक कंप्यूटर हम एक सर्किटरी डिजाइन करते हैं, तो देयर इज एन इनपुट, देयर इज अ कंप्यूटर, द कंप्यूटिंग सेंटर और प्रोसेसिंग यूनिट, देन देयर इज द आउटपुट. इस साइड के आउटपुट पे मसला आएगा क्योंकि मोटर रिस्पॉन्स इज द आउटपुट, राइट? तो हमारे पास नॉन कॉमिटेंट आएगा. Commitment squint कहाँ मसला होगा? Think about that. I'm going to end this session now, and when I come back, you'll tell me the answers.